The evolution of the log cabin, from simple shelter to masterpiece. It is an icon forged in the crucible of the American wilderness, a symbol of resilience built with nothing more than muscle, steel, and timber. But the log cabin is not a single, static design. It is a technology that has evolved over centuries, a direct reflection of the tools, techniques, and aspirations of the people who built them. From the crude, hastily erected shelters of the first Swedish settlers in 1638 to the complex, master-crafted homes of the 19th century frontier, the log cabin represents a relentless drive for improvement. This is not just a story about houses, it is a story about engineering. We will dissect the precise physics of corner notching, the thermal dynamics of chinking, and the structural mechanics of roof design. We will explore how the evolution from a simple broadaxe to a felling axe with a 4.5-inch cutting edge revolutionized construction speed and efficiency. This is the untold story of the log cabin, from simple shelter to architectural masterpiece. My name is Sam, and this is Wild America. Part 1. The Swedish Progenitor and the Frontier Necessity, 1638 to 1800. The Delaware River Valley, 1640. A small group of Swedish settlers, part of the New Sweden colony, stand before a dense forest of eastern white pine and oak. They carry not the advanced tools of later pioneers, but simple, heavy-headed felling axes. Their task is to build shelter before the brutal North American winter descends. The structure they erect is not the tidy, romanticized cabin of popular myth, but a crude, functional shelter known as a puerta. It is small, rarely larger than 12 by 16 feet, with a low ceiling of just 6 feet to conserve heat. The logs are unpeeled, averaging 8 inches in diameter, and the gaps between them are stuffed with moss and mud. This is the humble origin of the American log cabin, a design born of necessity and limited technology. The earliest log structures in North America were a direct import from the forests of Scandinavia. Swedish and Finnish colonists brought with them a building tradition that was centuries old, refined through generations of survival in harsh northern climates. The key technology was the corner notch, a joint that would determine the structural integrity and weather tightness of the entire building. The simplest and most common early form was the round notch, also known as the saddle notch. This involved cutting a simple, concave depression into the underside of each log with an axe, creating a curved channel exactly matching the diameter of the perpendicular log below it. The cutting process required precise technique. The builder would first score the log with shallow axe cuts spaced 1 inch apart across the width of the notch. Then, using a technique called nibbling, he would chop out small chips of wood between the score marks, gradually deepening the channel. A properly cut saddle notch was 3 to 4 inches deep for an 8-inch diameter log, creating a bearing surface of approximately 6 square inches. This method was fast, requiring only an axe and minimal skill, but it created a loose-fitting joint with large gaps, ranging from 2 to 4 inches, that had to be heavily chinked. The chinking mixture was a primitive mortar that varied by region and available materials. The basic recipe consisted of 3 parts clay-rich soil, 1 part sand for binding strength, and organic material for reinforcement. In the Delaware Valley, colonists used salt marsh grass cut to 2-inch lengths. In forested areas, they used animal hair from cattle, horses, or deer, mixed at a ratio of 1 handful per bucket of clay mixture. The mortar was applied by hand, pressed firmly into the gaps, and smoothed with a wooden paddle. This chinking was prone to washing out in heavy rain and shrinking as it dried, creating cracks that allowed cold air and moisture to penetrate. A typical cabin required rechinking twice per year, consuming approximately 40 man-hours of labor annually. The tools of this era were rudimentary but precisely designed for their tasks. The primary felling tool was a heavy, straight-handled axe weighing 4 to 5 pounds with a thick, wedge-shaped bit measuring 4 inches across. The handle was typically 32 inches long, made from hickory or ash, and shaped with a slight curve to provide maximum leverage. The axe head was forged from wrought iron with a steel cutting edge welded to the bit, a technique that provided durability while keeping costs manageable. It was effective for chopping through trees, but inefficient for shaping wood due to its thick profile, which created wide kerfs and rough surfaces. Logs were rarely squared or hewn during this period. The round, irregular shape of the raw timber was used as harvested. Tree selection was critical. Builders preferred eastern white pine, red oak, or chestnut for their straight grain and resistance to rot. A typical cabin required 40 to 50 logs, ranging from 14 to 20 feet in length. The logs were cut in winter when the sap was down, reducing the moisture content and making them lighter to handle. Each log was debarked using a draw knife or spud, a specialized tool with a 6-inch blade set at right angles to a long handle, which could strip bark in long, continuous sheets. The fit between logs was deliberately imperfect, creating gaps that would be filled with chinking. To compensate for the poor thermal performance of these walls, pioneers built massive fireplaces that often consumed an entire wall. These were constructed from field stones gathered from nearby streams, each stone carefully selected for size and shape. The stones were laid in courses using the same clay mortar used for chinking, with larger stones forming the foundation and smaller ones filling gaps. A typical fireplace opening measured 4 feet wide and 3 feet high, with a firebox depth of 18 inches. The throat of the chimney was narrowed to 8 inches to create proper draft, and the entire structure rose 12 to 15 feet above the roofline to ensure adequate draw. The construction process followed a strict sequence. First, the foundation stones were laid directly on level ground or on a shallow excavation filled with gravel for drainage. The sill logs, the first course of the wall, were placed on these stones and carefully leveled using wooden wedges. Each subsequent course was rolled into place using skids and levers, with the builder checking for level and plumb at each corner. The roof structure consisted of simple rafters made from smaller logs, typically 6 to 8 inches in diameter, spaced 24 inches on center. These were notched to sit on the top plate and joined at the ridge with a simple lap joint secured with wooden pegs. Roofs were simple gabled structures with a shallow pitch, often no more than 30 degrees. Rafters were simply smaller diameter logs, and the roofing material was typically bark, large sheets of elm or birch, peeled in the spring when the sap was running and laid in overlapping layers. These bark roofs were effective at shedding water but had a short lifespan, often needing replacement every 2 to 3 years. There were no glass windows. Openings were covered with greased animal hides or paper, which admitted a dim, translucent light but offered little insulation. The floor was simply packed earth, which was cold, damp, and unsanitary. This was not a home in the modern sense. It was a basic life-sustaining shelter, a fortress against the wilderness. Part 2, The Era of the Craftsman and the Rise of the Dovetail, 1800 to 1860. The Ohio River Valley, 1840. A second-generation pioneer stands beside a half-finished cabin. The logs are not round, but perfectly hewn into 8-inch by 12-inch rectangular timbers. The corners are not the simple overlapping saddle notches of his grandfather's generation, but intricate, interlocking joints. He is using a new set of tools, a broadaxe with a 12-inch cutting edge for hewing the logs, and a framing chisel for cutting the corner notches. The cabin he is building is larger, tighter, and more durable than its predecessors. It is a testament to a new era of craftsmanship, an era in which the log cabin began its transformation from a crude shelter into a work of art. The 19th century brought a revolution in log cabin construction, driven by improved tools and the influx of German and Scots-Irish immigrants with advanced woodworking skills developed over centuries in the forests of Europe. The most significant innovation was the widespread adoption of the dovetail notch, a joint that represented the pinnacle of traditional log building craftsmanship. This complex joint, shaped like a dove's tail, required a combination of saw and chisel work that demanded considerable skill and precision. The dovetail cutting process was a masterclass in woodworking technique. First, the builder would mark the log end with a template, creating an angled cut that flared outward at a precise 14-degree angle. Using a crosscut saw with 8 teeth per inch, he would make the initial cuts, then finish the joint with a 2-inch mortise chisel and wooden mallet. The male end of the joint, the tail, was cut to exact dimensions, 6 inches wide at the base, flaring to 8 inches at the top for a standard 10-inch log. The female end, the socket, was cut to match, with tolerances of no more than 1/16 inch to ensure a tight fit. The angled surfaces of the notch created a tight, interlocking connection that was incredibly strong and weather-resistant. The downward slope of the dovetail naturally shed water at a 14-degree angle, preventing it from settling in the joint and causing rot. The mechanical advantage of the angled cut meant that as the building settled and the logs compressed, the joint actually became tighter. A properly cut dovetail joint was so precise that it required minimal chinking, with gaps often less than ½ an inch. The bearing surface of a dovetail notch was approximately 40% larger than a simple saddle notch, distributing the load more effectively and reducing stress concentrations that could lead to splitting. Hewing logs into rectangular timbers became standard practice, transforming rough-cut logs into precisely dimensioned building materials. This was accomplished with a broadaxe, a specialized tool with a wide, single-beveled blade measuring 10 to 14 inches across. The broadaxe weighed 3 to 4 pounds and featured a distinctive offset handle that allowed the hewer to work close to the log surface without striking his knuckles. The blade was beveled on one side only, creating a chisel-like cutting action that could shave off thin, controlled chips of wood. The hewing process required exceptional skill and followed a precise sequence. First, the log was secured on hewing dogs, iron spikes driven into a hewing block to hold the timber steady. The hewer would score the log every 12 inches with a felling axe, cutting perpendicular grooves 2 inches deep to establish the finished dimension. Then, standing on the log and working from one end to the other, he would use the broadaxe to remove the wood between the score marks, creating a flat surface. A master hewer could remove a 2-inch slab from a 20-foot log in less than an hour, creating a surface so smooth it appeared planned. The resulting rectangular timbers, typically measuring 8 by 12 inches or 10 by 14 inches, could be stacked with minimal gaps, creating walls that were dramatically more weathertight than round log construction. The flat interior surfaces could be planed smooth with a jack plane and whitewashed with a mixture of lime, water, and salt, creating bright, clean living spaces that reflected available light. This technique, known as half-dovetail construction, combined hewn logs on the interior with round logs on the exterior, providing both structural integrity and aesthetic appeal. Foundation construction also improved. Instead of placing logs directly on the ground or on a few corner stones, builders began constructing continuous stone foundations. This raised the sill log, the first log of the wall, off the ground, protecting it from moisture and rot, the primary enemy of any wooden structure. The fireplace became more sophisticated as well, with a smaller, more efficient firebox and a taller, better-drawing chimney. The use of a cast-iron cooking crane, which could swing in and out of the fire, made cooking safer and more convenient. Glass windows, though still expensive, became more common. A typical frontier cabin of this era might have 2 or 3 small 4-pane windows. The floor was no longer dirt, but split log puncheons, laid with the flat side up and smoothed with an adze. The roof was now typically covered with hand-split wooden shingles, or shakes, made from cedar or oak. These were far more durable than bark and could last for 20 to 30 years. The log cabin was no longer just a temporary shelter. It was becoming a permanent, comfortable home, a symbol of the homesteader's skill and determination. Part 3. The Railroad, the Milled Log, and the Catalog Cabin, 1860 to 1920. Sears, Roebuck and Company Catalog, 1908. A family pores over the pages of the Book of Modern Homes and Building Plans. They are not looking at blueprints for a traditional hand-built cabin, but at pre-designed kits with names like the Avalon and the Maytown. For $945, they can purchase a complete, ready-to-assemble log cabin with all the logs, lumber, windows, doors, and hardware delivered by railroad to their nearest depot. The logs are not hand-hewn but perfectly uniform, milled to a consistent diameter and pre-notched at the factory. This is the industrial revolution of the log cabin, a moment when the ancient craft of log building met the modern age of mass production. The expansion of the railroads across America in the late 19th century had a profound impact on log cabin construction. For the first time, building materials could be easily transported to even the most remote areas. This led to the rise of the milled log, a log that was processed in a sawmill to have a uniform shape and size. Milled logs could be round, square, or D-shaped, flat on one side, round on the other. They were often equipped with a tongue and groove system which created an airtight seal between the logs and eliminated the need for chinking altogether. Corner notching was also standardized. The most common notch for milled logs was the mortise and tenon, a simple, strong joint in which a projecting tenon on one log fits into a corresponding mortise or hole in the other. This joint was easy to cut with factory machinery and allowed for fast, simple assembly on site. Another popular style was the butt and pass, a technique that required no notching at all. In this method, the logs simply abut each other at the corners, with one log extending past the corner on each course. This was the fastest and easiest method of all, but it was also the least weather-tight and was often used for more rustic or temporary structures. The availability of affordable, mass-produced building materials changed the design of the log cabin. Roofs were now typically covered with asphalt shingles, and windows were larger and more numerous. Interior walls were often covered with plaster or drywall, and floors were made of tongue and groove pine boards. The log cabin was no longer a one-room shelter. It was a multi-room house with a kitchen, bedrooms, and a living area. The ultimate expression of this new era was the catalog log home. Companies like Sears, Roebuck and Company, Aladdin, and Montgomery Ward sold complete log cabin kits that could be ordered through the mail. These kits included everything needed to build a house, from the pre-cut logs to the doorknobs and paint. Between 1908 and 1940, Sears sold over 70,000 kit homes, many of them log cabins. This was the democratization of the log cabin, a moment when the dream of owning a log home became accessible to the average American family. Part 4, The Modern Renaissance and the Return to Craft, 1920 to present. The Great Smoky Mountains, 2025. A team of builders is constructing a massive log home. The logs are enormous, 24 inches in diameter, and each one has been hand-selected, hand-peeled, and hand-scribed to fit its unique position in the wall. The corner notches are not the simple joints of the past, but complex, gravity-defying works of art. The builders are using a mix of modern and traditional tools, chainsaws and power drills, alongside centuries-old chisels and slicks. The house they are building is not a rustic cabin, but a luxurious multi-million-dollar estate. This is the modern renaissance of the log cabin, a movement that combines the best of traditional craftsmanship with the precision of modern engineering. The 20th and 21st centuries have seen a resurgence of interest in the log cabin, not as a symbol of poverty, but as a symbol of luxury, craftsmanship, and a connection to nature. This modern renaissance is characterized by a return to the principles of hand craftsmanship, but on a scale and with a level of precision that would have been unimaginable to the early pioneers. The dominant style of this new era is the full scribe method, also known as the Scandinavian or chinkless method. In this technique, the entire length of each log is scribed and cut to fit perfectly onto the log below it. This creates a completely airtight wall with no need for chinking. The process is incredibly labor-intensive, requiring a high degree of skill and specialized tools like a scriber and a slick, a large, long-handled chisel. Corner notches have also reached a new level of sophistication. The compression fit saddle notch, a modern evolution of the traditional saddle notch, is designed to get tighter as the logs shrink and settle over time. The diamond notch and the scarf notch are other complex, beautiful joints that are both structural and decorative. These modern log homes are often massive structures with soaring cathedral ceilings, huge windows, and open floor plans. They are built with the finest materials, including exotic woods, natural stone, and high-end finishes. The tools have evolved as well. While hand tools are still used for the finishing work, chainsaws have replaced axes for felling and bucking logs, and power tools are used for drilling and cutting. Computer-aided design, CAD software, is used to create precise building plans, and cranes are used to lift the massive logs into place. This combination of old and new techniques allows modern builders to create log homes that are both beautiful and energy efficient, rustic and luxurious. The evolution of the log cabin is a story of human ingenuity, a story of how a simple shelter, born of necessity, became a masterpiece of architectural design. It is a story that is still being written as a new generation of builders and homeowners rediscovers the timeless appeal of living in a house made of logs. Conclusion. From a 12 by 16 foot Swedish ported to a 10,000 square foot mountain lodge, the log cabin has mirrored America's own journey. It began as a raw, functional tool for survival, evolved into a symbol of rugged individualism, was standardized by the forces of industrialization, and has now been reborn as a bespoke work of art. Each notch, each tool mark, each chink in the wall tells a story of adaptation and innovation. The log cabin is more than just a building, it is a living document, a testament to the enduring human desire to carve a home out of the wilderness, to build something permanent, something beautiful, something that will last. If you want to learn more about the specific hands-on techniques used by early pioneers, be sure to watch our video on 7 Forgotten Frontier Home Features. And as always, stay safe, and we'll see you next time on Wild America.